On a quiet Sunday afternoon, two hikers made their way along a solitary dirt trail in central Texas. The woods had been peaceful, but as the day wore on, the air seemed to shift. Something beyond the trees was watching them, following them. They could feel it before they heard it. They spun toward the riverbank as a rock struck the ground just inches behind them. They quickened their pace down the trail and could hear branches snapping as the thing kept pace. Just as they crossed a wooden bridge, a howl shook the forest around them and rolled through the woods. A massive jet-black figure burst between the trees, running upright, then vanished into the swampy brush. The woods went dead quiet. Just 40 yards ahead, the creature peered out from behind a tree and stared directly at them. Then, it let out a blood-curdling howl. This doesn't look like the Texas most people imagine. About an hour east of San Antonio, along the San Marcos River, sits Palmetto State Park and the village of Ottine. Founded in the 1800s around the old Otto family mill, the village's unusual name combines the Otto family surname with the first name of Adolf Otto's daughter-in-law, Christine. Ottine was once a busy railroad and farming community. Today, little remains beyond a scattering of homes, old buildings, and a welcome sign along the road. Ottine Swamp here in the middle of Texas. The ecosystem feels like a relic from 10,000 years ago. It shouldn't exist. And depending on who you ask, neither should the thing that lives here. Miles of trails disappear beneath dense palmettos and wetlands, tangled woods that feel almost prehistoric. And for generations, people around Ottine have claimed that something large has been moving through those woods. Something heard long before they ever saw it. In 1980, Texas writer Ed Sayers visited Ottine and sat down with local rancher Berthold Jackson. Jackson took him back to one night, years before, when he and Johnny Bohm were hunting in the swamp. The two men had separated, taking positions some distance apart. Then something large began moving through the woods between them. Brush bent beneath its weight. Tree limbs cracked as it forced its way through the vegetation. Both men raised their lights and searched for the animal. But there was nothing there. No shadow, not even the reflection of eyes staring back at them. Whatever it was moved directly between the two hunters and disappeared deeper into the swamp. Jackson knew they weren't the only ones who had encountered it. Billy Webb and Ab Ussery were checking a trot line along the river when the tall bloodweeds beside their boat began bending toward the water. Something hidden along the bank was following them. They aimed a light into the weeds. Again, they saw nothing. For years, the people of Ottine could only hear the creature moving through their swamp. Then one night, it finally stepped out of the darkness. One night in the early 1970s, that darkness finally gave way. Brewster Short and Wayne Hodges were hunting near Ottine when their dogs caught the creature's trail. The animals tore through the woods, chasing it nearly 2 miles to the base of Lookout Hill. Short and Hodges followed in their car, but when they reached the hill, the chase suddenly stopped. One of the dogs came scrambling out of the darkness and pressed itself against the vehicle, terrified. Then, a large gray figure rose behind the car. For the first time, the men could see the thing their dogs had been chasing through the swamp, but it wasn't running anymore. It had followed them back. The two men hit the gas and sped away from Lookout Hill, leaving 2 of their dogs somewhere in the darkness. More than 40 years later, something emerged from those same woods again. In June 2014, a husband and wife stopped at Palmetto State Park while returning home from a short trip. They were the only hikers on the trail. Near the San Marcos River, the husband spotted an enormous footprint pressed into the damp ground, roughly 16 inches long, with large toes clearly visible. They examined it briefly, then continued toward the river. As they climbed back up the steep bank, a baseball-sized rock struck the ground directly behind him. The couple searched the riverbank for whoever had thrown it. No one was there. They continued along the San Marcos River Trail as branches snapped inside the vegetation. Then came a deep, unfamiliar howl. They cautiously continued onto Mesquite Flats Trail. The howl followed them. About 3/4 of a mile later, they crossed a long wooden bridge. A large limb crashed onto the trail behind them. Then, 4 heavy thumps struck the ground as something tore through the trees. The wife caught a clear, if fleeting, glimpse of it. A massive, jet-black figure running upright through the woods at what she called an ungodly speed. It moved faster than any person could run, then abruptly disappeared into the brush. Moments later, both hikers saw it again. 40 yards away, the creature peered from behind a tree and began to watch them. The couple hurried onto the Ottine Swamp trail. Half a mile from safety, the howl returned, closer and clearer than before. But this time, it came from somewhere ahead of them. The couple raced through the final stretch, reached their vehicle, and immediately drove to park headquarters to report what they had seen. They expected disbelief. Instead, the rangers told them these reports were nothing new. Strange howls and rocks thrown from the woods were apparently reported often. They had come face to face with Ottine's oldest legend. I followed the trail toward the San Marcos River, through the same dense vegetation where hunters, fishermen, and hikers claimed something had followed them. Before leaving, I stopped at park headquarters looking for answers. The creature stared back from t-shirts, stickers, and souvenirs. Now, of course, I went to the Palmetto State Park headquarters. I talked to the rangers on duty. They say the Ottine Swamp monster is just a local legend. It's a local myth. Then why do they sell so much merchandise of it? So what walks the bogs of Palmetto State Park? Is it some creature from a bygone era, still hidden inside this isolated ecosystem? Or has every broken limb, distant howl, and shadow between the trees simply added another chapter to the story? What have hunters, fishermen, and hikers been hearing and occasionally seeing in these woods for generations? Maybe they all encountered the same living creature. Maybe it was a trick of the night, eyes seeing figures against trees and moss. Or maybe an ancient Texas swamp has simply learned how to keep an old Texas legend alive.